Kemi never
You will
planned
work
to
for
work for
me.
someone like him.
I'm your
She
boss.
only wanted a
Oh,
simple
okay,
job,
sir.
something to support her mother and pay her school fees. But life had other ideas. When she arrived at the towering glass building of Hyunwoo Tech, her stomach twisted. The company was far above anything she had ever imagined. Marble floors, polished walls, and employees walking like they were late for a meeting with God. She clutched her small handbag and kept repeating to herself, "Just get the job, don't embarrass yourself." She was there to interview for a personal assistant position, but what she didn't know was who she would be assisting. The interview room door opened sharply. A tall man stepped out, cold eyes, sharp jaw, perfectly arranged hair, presence like a storm you don't see coming. He walked past her without a glance, but the air shifted. Two staff whispered behind her. "That's him. Hyunwoo. The CEO." Kemi swallowed hard. "That man, that's who I'd be assisting?" She almost stood up to run, but before she could, a woman with glasses called her name. "Kemi Adetayo, please follow me." Inside the office, her heart kept racing. The woman interviewing her smiled kindly, but kept glancing at the door, almost nervously. 10 minutes later, the door swung open again, and this time he came in. Hyunwoo, CEO, feared by everyone, respected by all. He didn't greet her. He simply sat, scanned her CV, and said, "You have no corporate experience." Kemi blinked rapidly. Yes, sir." "You stutter when nervous." She swallowed. "I'm trying." "You're late." "I came 20 minutes early," she whispered. He finally looked at her, directly. For one full second, his eyes held hers, unreadable. Then, "You're hired." Kemi's mouth opened. "I'm... What?" He stood up. "You start tomorrow, assistant to the CEO." She couldn't understand. Why her? Why choose someone with no experience? Why hire someone he clearly thought was unqualified? As she left the office in confusion, she overheard two managers whispering, "Why did he pick her? He rejects everyone." There must be a reason. Kemi held her bag tighter. She didn't know his reason. She didn't know his world. She didn't know his secrets. All she knew was this. She was hired to assist him, not fall for him. But fate had a different script. Kemi barely slept that night. She kept replaying the interview in her mind. Hyunwoo's cold stare, the abrupt hiring, the confusion. By morning, she had convinced herself that maybe he chose her by accident. Maybe someone else was supposed to get the job. Maybe they would correct the mistake when she arrived. But she still dressed neatly in her best blouse and the only pair of heels she owned. They weren't corporate, but they were clean, and the heel click gave her a bit of confidence. When she entered the building, the receptionist straightened. "You're the new assistant, right? CEO's office, top floor." Kemi felt her heart jump. People were actually expecting her. This wasn't a dream. The elevator ride felt endless. The higher it rose, the tighter her chest became. On the top floor, the atmosphere changed. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, like the air itself respected whoever worked there. Hyunwoo's previous assistant, a woman in her mid-30s, met her at the hallway. She looked exhausted, as if she had survived a war. "You're Kemi?" she asked softly. "Yes, Ma." "You're replacing me. I'm leaving today." "Oh, I'm sorry. Did something happen?" The woman let out a dry laugh, tired and sad. "You'll understand soon." Before Kemi could ask more, the woman guided her into an office connected to a larger one. "This is your workstation. His office is through that door. Never enter unless he calls you. He hates interruptions." Kemi nodded quickly. "Second rule," the woman continued, "he hates excuses. Third, he hates disorganization. Fourth, don't argue. Fifth, don't..." The door opened. Hyunwoo stepped out with a file in his hand, sharp, tall, presence intense enough to make the air tighten. The former assistant froze. Hyunwoo didn't even greet them. He pointed the file at Kemi. "You're late." Kemi's throat closed. "Sir, I came before 8. I came before you. That means you're late." The former assistant nodded at Kemi as if saying, "This is what I warned you about." Hyunwoo handed her the file. "Organize this by priority level, then send the data summary to my email in 15 minutes. Kemi blinked. 15 minutes? His stare was cold enough to cut glass. She immediately sat down. The former assistant whispered, "Good luck," then hurried away before he could give her more work. Kemi opened the file. Her heart dropped. It was packed with disorganized documents, numbers, Korean notes, scattered pages. It would take at least an hour, not 15 minutes. But she tried. Her hands moved fast, mind even faster. She grouped documents, scanned through figures, sorted everything logically. 10 minutes passed. Then 13. She rushed the typed summary and emailed it with trembling fingers. 14 minutes, 30 seconds. She exhaled, relieved. Then the phone on her desk rang. "Come in." His voice. Kemi stood, smoothed her blouse, and entered his office. Hyunwoo didn't look up from his laptop. "Your summary." "I sent it, sir." He opened the email. Silence. He scrolled. Read. Scrolled again. More silence. Kemi felt sweat gathering at the back of her neck. She braced herself for the worst. Then shockingly he said, "Good." Kemi's eyes widened. He continued typing. Better than expected. He still didn't look at her, but something in his tone had softened by 1%, just enough for her to breathe again. Before she could thank him, he added, "However," her heart dropped again. "You used the wrong formatting style. Fix it." She quickly bowed slightly. "Yes, sir." Before she turned to leave, he finally raised his eyes toward her. For the first time, his gaze wasn't cold. It was curious, like she had surprised him, but he didn't want her to know. "Kemi, sir? Don't disappoint me." She held his gaze steady this time. "I'll do my best." As she walked back to her desk, she didn't notice that Hyunwoo watched her for a moment longer, long enough for something unspoken to flicker in his eyes, something that wasn't annoyance, something closer to interest. And that was how their first day began, not with warmth but with tension. Yet tension was the beginning of every story that ever turned into destiny. The next day, Kemi arrived at the office with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The first day had been a whirlwind, a test of her skills and patience, but also a glimpse into the intensity of Hyunwoo's world. She had barely slept, replaying the moments in her mind, the cold stare, the impossible 15-minute deadline, the single word, "good," that had felt like an unexpected victory. As she stepped into the elevator, she adjusted the scarf around her neck, its bright colors a small piece of home she carried with her. Outside, Seoul's streets glimmered under the faint morning sun, the frost making the city look like a painting. It was beautiful in a cold, structured way, unlike the chaotic warmth of Lagos. She missed the noise, the smells, the constant motion, but she knew this opportunity was worth it. At the top floor, Hyunwoo was already at his desk, reviewing documents. His posture was precise, almost statuesque, yet there was a subtle fluidity in the way he moved, every gesture deliberate, controlled, but efficient. He didn't look up when she entered. That small omission made her heart skip. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. He nodded briefly. "Good morning. Today we start reviewing the content for our African partnership project." Kemi nodded and set her bag down. As she opened her laptop, he added without looking up, "Make sure the summaries are accurate. I don't have time for mistakes." "Yes, sir," she replied, though inside she was already scanning through dozens of files, translating, cross-checking, formatting. The hours passed quickly, yet unlike the previous day, there was a subtle rhythm between them now. She anticipated his requests before he spoke, handed him the correct files without prompting, and he, in turn, began to trust her corrections without interruption. A quiet understanding began to form, mutual respect born from competence and attention to detail. At noon, Hyunwoo looked up from his laptop for the first time. "Do you want lunch?" Kemi paused, surprised. Yes, sir, that would be nice." "Good. I've ordered something you might like." A few minutes later, a tray appeared with a mix of Korean and African-inspired dishes, specially prepared to accommodate her taste preferences. Kemi's eyes widened. "How did you know I'd like this?" Hyunwoo shrugged slightly, almost shyly. "I asked the kitchen to prepare meals suitable for someone from Nigeria. I looked at the cultural notes you submitted yesterday." It wasn't just a meal, it was thoughtfulness, a quiet bridge between two worlds. Kemi felt her chest warm, not with romance, not yet, but with the rare sensation of being truly seen. They ate in companionable silence. Hyunwoo occasionally glanced at her, not with judgment but with observation. When she laughed softly at a small joke, he didn't immediately look away. That moment, fleeting, made her heart beat faster than it should have. After lunch, they moved to a small conference room to review video submissions for the partnership program. Kemi translated interviews with African storytellers, poets, and musicians, making sure the nuance, emotion, and cultural context were accurately captured for Hyunwoo. He listened intently, nodding, sometimes pausing to ask questions that revealed more than curiosity. They revealed care. At one point, a young poet described a festival in Lagos. The colors, the music, the communal dancing. Hyunwoo leaned back, absorbing every word, occasionally turning to Kemi for clarification. "So the celebration is not just entertainment, it's about identity?" "Yes, sir. It's a way people preserve their history while celebrating life," she said. He nodded slowly. "I want the world to understand that, not just see it, but feel it." Kemi felt a pang of admiration. For someone so meticulous, so controlling in many ways, his heart sought understanding and beauty. She realized that the man who appeared cold and rigid could also be profoundly sensitive. When the day began to wind down, they walked together through the office corridors, papers in hand. Outside, snowflakes started drifting lazily across the cityscape, dusting the pavement in delicate white. Kemi paused at the window. "It's beautiful," she said, watching the flakes. Hyunwoo stood beside her silently. "Do you like snow?" "Not really," she admitted. "I just like the way it falls. Peaceful. Quiet. You notice it, but it doesn't interrupt anything." He looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching into a hint of a smile. "I never thought about it that way." For a moment they stood together, quiet but connected, two worlds observing the same scene and interpreting it differently, yet beautifully. As the office emptied and Kemi prepared to leave, Hyunwoo called her name. "Kemi." "Yes, sir?" "Tomorrow, we will start working on the joint presentation with African stakeholders. I need you to prepare a cultural briefing." "I will," she replied. His eyes lingered on hers for a brief moment, longer than usual, a subtle acknowledgement of her growing importance in his work and perhaps in his life. That evening, Kemi walked home, feeling the weight of the day and the unexpected stirrings in her heart. She didn't fully understand them. She was here to assist, not to fall in love, but she couldn't deny the small fascination, the curiosity about the man she was supposed to work for without attachment. Before she closed the door to her apartment, she glanced at her phone and sent a short note to viewers following the story. If you're enjoying Kemi and Hyunwoo's journey, stay tuned. Their story is only just beginning, and there are moments you won't want to miss. It was a gentle invitation, soft and unobtrusive, just as their relationship was unfolding, slowly, carefully, and full of unspoken possibilities. That night, she dreamed not of work, but of conversations yet to be had, of moments yet to be shared, and of the snow falling quietly over two worlds slowly beginning to intersect. The next morning, Kemi arrived at the office with a sense of quiet determination. Yesterday had been intense, but she had survived, and she had even glimpsed the man behind the stern facade. She adjusted her scarf and straightened her blouse, reminding herself to stay professional. She was here to assist, not to get distracted by thoughts of Hyunwoo. But the moment she stepped into the office, she noticed something different. Hyunwoo was at his desk, reviewing reports, yet he didn't immediately bury himself in work. Instead, he glanced up, caught her eye, and gave the faintest nod, a silent acknowledgement that made her pulse quicken. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but carrying a subtle warmth. "Good morning, sir," Kemi replied, carefully matching his tone. He handed her a stack of documents. "These need translation and prioritization for the meeting with international partners. You have 2 hours." Kemi took a deep breath and got to work. She moved quickly, organizing the papers, translating and formatting while keeping an eye on his reactions. Hyunwoo walked around the room intermittently, checking the work with meticulous attention, yet he didn't interrupt or criticize unnecessarily. Instead, he occasionally offered a brief nod or a quiet word of approval. By mid-morning, a small routine had formed. Kemi translated, Hyunwoo reviewed, and they shared occasional silent glances that said more than words. She realized that beneath his disciplined exterior, he was patient and attentive, valuing precision and effort over showy gestures. After finishing the documents, Hyunwoo called her into his office. "Good work," he said, scrolling through her translations. "Clear, accurate, and culturally sensitive. You anticipated what the partners would need without me saying a word." Kemi's chest lifted. Praise from him was rare, and it felt significant. "Thank you, sir. I just want to do my best." "I can see that," he said, looking at her thoughtfully. "You have a way of observing that is useful. Not everyone notices the details that matter." The comment made her smile. It was subtle, but she felt recognized in a way that went beyond skill. It was acknowledgement of her perspective, her way of seeing the world. Later, they moved on to a meeting with a group of international storytellers and cultural ambassadors. Kemi translated every word, paying attention to tone, emotion, and nuance. Hyunwoo observed closely, occasionally jotting notes, asking clarifying questions, and letting her speak freely without interruption. During a break, Kemi stepped outside to catch a breath of the chilly winter air. The snow had thickened slightly, dusting the streets and rooftops with pristine white. She inhaled deeply, enjoying the stillness. Hyunwoo appeared beside her silently, hands in his pockets. "You like it?" he asked. "It's beautiful," she replied. "Quiet, soft, peaceful." He glanced at her, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "You notice things others don't." She laughed softly. "Someone has to. You'd miss it otherwise." He studied her, eyes lingering just a moment too long, and she felt the air shift slightly. It was subtle, imperceptible to anyone else, but to her it carried weight, a quiet recognition, a small connection forming. Inside, the afternoon continued with workshops and interviews. One young storyteller shared a performance inspired by Lagos markets, the music, the dance, the vibrant colors. Kemi translated with care, ensuring the emotion reached Hyunwoo accurately. He watched intently, occasionally turning to ask her for clarification on cultural context, showing a genuine interest in understanding her world. By the time they wrapped up, the sky outside had turned a soft gray, the snowflakes glowing faintly under streetlights. Kemi packed her things slowly, savoring the last moments of their shared work. Hyunwoo approached her desk quietly. "Tomorrow, we'll visit a local cultural center. You will guide me through it. I want to learn from you." Kemi's heart lifted at the request. "I'll prepare everything, sir." He nodded, his expression unreadable but somehow gentle. "Good." As she left the building, she whispered to herself, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm here to assist, but maybe I'm learning too." Before closing the door to her apartment, she sent a soft message for viewers following the story. If you're enjoying Kemi and Hyunwoo's journey, stay tuned. The story is just beginning and there are moments you won't want to miss. It was a gentle reminder, naturally woven into her day, as subtle as the growing connection between two people who had not intended to meet hearts, but now could not ignore the pull between them. That night, Kemi dreamt of snow falling softly, of quiet walks, and of conversations yet to be had, a story unfolding one careful step at a time. The next morning, Kemi woke to a soft gray light filtering through her apartment window. Her mind drifted to yesterday, the quiet connection she had glimpsed with Hyunwoo, the way he noticed the details she cared about, and the strange warmth in his acknowledgement. She had barely slept. Thinking about the cultural center visit planned for today, it was her chance to guide him through her world, to show him the vibrancy, the life, and the beauty she loved. When she arrived at Hanil Tech, the office already hummed with quiet efficiency. Hyunwoo was at his desk, reviewing notes, but the moment he saw her, he paused. Not with the cold detachment of the first day, not with the cautious appraisal of yesterday, but with something softer, almost patient. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady but warmer than usual. "Good morning, sir," Kemi replied, feeling a small flutter of courage. He handed her a folder. "The schedule for the cultural center. You will lead me through the activities. I expect detailed explanations." "Yes, sir," she said, smiling faintly. As they left the office, the snow from the previous day had melted slightly, leaving a light glisten on the streets. Seoul's winter air carried a crisp freshness that reminded Kemi of her hometown's rainy season, though quieter and cleaner. She pointed out small things, local street vendors with hot rice cakes, children laughing as they sledged down the small hill near the park, murals painted on building walls telling stories of the city. Hyunwoo watched her closely, asking questions here and there, not to test her, not to critique, but genuinely curious. "What does this symbol mean?" he asked, pointing to a painted crane on a building wall. "It represents longevity, hope, and good fortune," Kemi explained. "It's common in Korean art, but it reminds me of African murals too, the way symbolism conveys dreams and history." He nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Symbols carry the soul of a culture, not just decoration." Kemi noticed the subtle reverence in his tone. He wasn't just listening, he was absorbing, processing, respecting. It made her heart beat slightly faster. She had expected a demanding, distant boss, yet here he was, quietly learning from her, letting her world unfold before him. At the cultural center, they met local artists, painters, musicians, storytellers. Kemi translated their introductions and guided Hyunwoo through interactive sessions. One musician showed the traditional gayegium, explaining the gentle strings and how they mirrored emotions. Kemi conveyed every nuance, watching Hyunwoo's fingers twitch slightly as if he wished he could play. "You feel it in your chest, don't you?" she asked softly. He looked at her, surprised she noticed. "Yes, the music, it's subtle but it moves," she smiled. "That's why art matters. It tells what words sometimes can't." For the first time, he looked at her not as an assistant, not as someone responsible for accuracy, but as a guide, a companion in understanding. The shift was small, almost imperceptible, yet profound. After the sessions, they walked through a quiet courtyard with snow dusting the trees. Kemi held her scarf tightly around her neck. Hyunwoo walked beside her, his hands in his coat pockets, his eyes scanning the surroundings thoughtfully. "You're very patient," he said suddenly. Kemi blinked. "Patient? Me?" "Yes, you explain, you observe, you listen. Most people would just rush, translate, and leave. You make the experience live." She felt warmth creep into her chest. "I just want to do a good job. I want people to feel understood." He nodded, a rare softness in his gaze. "And you do. I see that." They paused near a small fountain, watching the ice crystals shimmer under the weak winter sun. A few children threw snow at each other, laughing, shouting, playing. The scene reminded Kemi of her neighborhood back home, the chaos, the joy, the shared community spirit. Hyunwoo glanced at her. "Do you miss home?" She hesitated. "Every day, but I try to carry it with me wherever I go. The people, the sounds, the smell, it's all part of me." He considered this, then said quietly, "I want to understand it better. Through you, if you allow me." Kemi's heart skipped a beat, not because he had declared love, he hadn't, but because he asked to understand her world, to see through her eyes, to walk alongside her. That alone felt intimate, special, and new. As they returned to the office, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the city streets. Kemi couldn't help noticing how the light caught the edges of his hair, how the lines of his face softened in the evening glow. She looked away quickly, forcing herself to focus on the work at hand. Inside, they reviewed the recordings and notes from the cultural center. Kemi translated, explained, and contextualized, while Hyunwoo asked questions, occasionally pausing to jot down a note. Their professional rapport was deepening, yet the unspoken moments, the shared glances, the soft smiles, the quiet understanding were becoming more frequent. By the end of the day, Kemi gathered her things. Before leaving, she glanced at him. "Thank you for trusting me today," she said softly. He looked up, meeting her eyes fully for a moment. "No, thank you for guiding me, for showing me what matters." A subtle connection lingered between them, unspoken, unacknowledged, but undeniable. As Kemi walked home through the quiet streets, snow lightly falling again, she whispered a gentle note for viewers following their journey. Kemi and Hyunwoo's story is slowly unfolding. Each day brings new discoveries and moments of warmth that remind us why connections matter. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Her apartment door closed behind her, but the memory of the day, the subtle exchanges, and the warmth of his attention followed her. She didn't yet know where this path would lead, only that each day brought them closer, not just in work, but in understanding, respect, and something that felt suspiciously like the beginning of love. That night she fell asleep with the snow still falling gently outside, dreaming of quiet moments, laughter, and the possibility of a heart slowly opening to someone she never expected to care for. The following morning, Kemi woke to the sound of a soft chime from her phone, an early message from Hyunwoo. "Morning, don't forget the briefing notes for the Lagos segment. I want to discuss them before lunch." Her fingers hovered over the screen. It was brief, professional, yet thoughtful. He was thinking about the project, about her, and he had reached out first. She smiled softly, typed a quick acknowledgement, and tucked the phone beside her pillow. By the time she arrived at Hyunwoo Tech, the office was already alive with quiet energy. Hyunwoo was at his desk, reviewing reports, his posture precise and measured. Yet when he noticed her entering, he offered a small nod, almost imperceptible, but for Kemi it felt significant, a silent welcome to a shared day. "Good morning," she said, settling at her desk. "Good morning," he replied, not looking up immediately, but his presence was close, attentive, aware. The morning was spent reviewing documents for the Lagos segment of their partnership project. Kemi meticulously translated cultural notes, contextual explanations, and storytelling submissions, making sure each detail captured the essence of African artistry and life. Hyunwoo reviewed each piece with care, asking clarifying questions not to challenge her, but to understand her perspective fully. At one point, he leaned back in his chair, studying a translation she had annotated. "You've captured not just the words," he said quietly, "but the intention. That is rare." Kemi felt a warmth she couldn't explain. Praise from him was always measured, and when it came, it carried weight. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "I try to understand, not just translate." He looked at her, the faintest curve touching his lips. "I see that. It matters." By midday, they moved to a small meeting room to discuss storytelling strategies with their international team. Kemi translated conversations, ensuring both sides understood nuance and tone. Through it all, she noticed how Hyunwoo valued her judgment, nodded at her insights, and occasionally sought her clarification on cultural interpretations. She realized he wasn't just relying on her for translation, he trusted her perspective. During a short break, Kemi stepped outside for fresh air. The winter city was quiet now, soft snow falling, dusting the streets in white. She inhaled deeply, savoring the crisp air. Hyunwoo joined her quietly, standing a few steps away. "You're very calm under pressure," he said. Kemi turned slightly, surprised. "I try to be. It helps me focus." He studied her briefly. "I've noticed. You don't rush. You listen. You observe. Not everyone can do that." She smiled faintly, feeling the warmth creep into her chest. "I've had to be observant my whole life. It helps me survive and understand people." Hyunwoo nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I see why you're good at what you do, but I also see that you notice things most people miss." The words made her heart flutter, not because he complimented her skill, but because he acknowledged her, the essence of who she was. They walked together back into the office, the subtle silence between them carrying weight. It wasn't awkward, it was mutual understanding, a space where words weren't always necessary. Back inside, they reviewed a video submission from a young African filmmaker. The filmmaker captured street life, family gatherings, and music-filled evenings, the vibrancy and rhythm of Lagos. Kemi translated, explaining cultural references and nuances. Hyunwoo watched, asking occasional questions to ensure he fully grasped the context. "You're very detailed," he said softly, "and patient. You don't just relay information, you teach it." Her fingers froze over the keyboard for a moment. I want people to understand, not just hear." "That's exactly why I asked for you," he said, looking at her fully for a brief moment. His eyes, usually cool and composed, had a softness she hadn't noticed before. Kemi's chest fluttered again, awareness settling deep inside her. She wasn't supposed to fall for him, she knew that, but moments like this made it difficult to deny the pull she felt. By late afternoon, they wrapped up the day's work. The office was quiet, most staff having left, leaving only the soft hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. Hyunwoo finally looked at her. "Tomorrow we will prepare for the first live webinar with African artists. I want you to guide me through it, explain the context, the significance. Your insight will be crucial." Kemi nodded, a small thrill running through her. She had expected tasks, deadlines, and stress, but not trust, not this acknowledgement that her understanding mattered as much as her work. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "You're welcome," he replied, his tone measured yet warmer than before. As she packed her bag, she couldn't help noticing the subtle shifts in him, the way he glanced at her occasionally, the rare softness in his expression, the patience that seemed to grow with each day. Something was unfolding between them, not in words or declarations, but in quiet moments and shared understanding. Before leaving, she whispered a gentle message for her followers. "Kemi and Hyunwoo are discovering more than just work tasks together. Each day brings subtle changes, small acknowledgments, and connections you won't want to miss. Stay tuned." Walking through the streets toward her apartment, the soft snow still falling, Kemi felt a strange sense of anticipation. Their paths were intertwined not by choice but by circumstance, and yet she couldn't deny the quiet excitement in discovering the person behind the stern exterior, learning that even the most disciplined hearts could be touched by understanding, care, and perhaps something more. That night, as she prepared for sleep, Kemi thought about tomorrow, the webinar, the conversations, the quiet moments she would share with Hyunwoo. She felt nervous, excited, and a little aware of the pull growing between them. And somewhere in the city, Hyunwoo, alone in his office, was likely reviewing his notes, thinking about the same subtle connection he could neither name nor ignore. The story, she realized, was unfolding slowly, delicately, and beautifully, just like the snow falling over two worlds beginning to intersect. The next morning, Kemi arrived at the office carrying her usual quiet determination. Winter had deepened in Seoul, and the streets were lined with frost, giving the city a sharp, sparkling beauty. She pulled her scarf tighter and reminded herself to remain professional. She was here to assist, not to be distracted by the subtle pull she felt whenever Hyunwoo looked at her. Hyunwoo was already at his desk when she arrived, reviewing the latest submissions from African storytellers. His gaze lifted briefly as she entered, and she noticed a small, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. For some reason, that single gesture made her chest tighten. "Good morning, sir," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, his voice calm, yet carrying a faint warmth. The day's agenda was packed. They were preparing for the first live webinar connecting African artists with Korean audiences. Kemi's task was to ensure every cultural nuance was translated accurately and that each participant's voice and emotion were fully conveyed. As she worked, she noticed Hyunwoo observing her more closely than before, not critically but thoughtfully. When she hesitated over a translation, he didn't criticize. Instead, he asked a question. "Would it make sense to phrase it this way?" Kemi nodded, surprised at his approach. "Yes, sir. That captures the intent better." He gave a brief nod, satisfied, and returned to his notes. It was subtle, but Kemi felt the difference. He wasn't just giving orders, he was collaborating, engaging, trusting her judgment. During a brief break, Kemi stepped out to the terrace. The city stretched out before her, snow glistening over rooftops and streets. Hyunwoo joined her silently, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You notice things others miss," he said quietly, almost as if he were thinking aloud. Kemi looked at him, surprised. "I try to. It helps me understand people and places." He nodded slowly. "I see that. It's valuable." There was a pause, and for a moment the cold air felt softer, the city quieter. Kemi felt an odd warmth spreading in her chest. She realized it wasn't just the winter sun or the beauty of the terrace, it was him noticing her, truly noticing her. When they returned inside, the webinar began. Kemi guided Hyunwoo through introductions, providing background on each artist, translating with care, and ensuring the context was fully understood. Hyunwoo listened intently, occasionally turning to her for clarification, showing a level of trust and reliance that made her chest flutter. One artist shared a story about her grandmother's home in Lagos, describing the smell of jollof rice cooking in the evenings, the laughter of children playing in the streets, and the songs sung during family gatherings. Kemi translated every detail, making sure the emotion and memory were felt. Hyunwoo leaned back, his expression thoughtful, absorbing every word. "You make their world feel real," he said quietly during a break, his voice barely above a whisper. Kemi blushed slightly. "I just want people to understand, to feel it too." He turned to her fully for the first time, making eye contact without a hint of the usual strictness. "You're good at that, better than anyone I've worked with." Her heart raced. She tried to focus on her notes, but her hands trembled slightly. This was more than professional praise. It carried recognition, attention, and something undefinable. The day continued with a series of translations and cultural briefings. Hyunwoo asked questions, not as a test, but to deepen his understanding. Kemi realized that this man, so disciplined and composed, was willing to be vulnerable in small ways, to learn from her, and to let her guide him. By late afternoon, they were alone in the office. The sun had begun to set, casting a warm, golden glow across the city. Kemi packed her bag slowly, savoring the quiet moments. Hyunwoo approached her desk. "Tomorrow, we will visit a traditional market to gather more stories. I want you to show me what's important, what I should notice." Kemi smiled faintly. "I will. You'll see the heart of the city through its people." He nodded, a small softness in his eyes. "Good. I look forward to it." Before leaving, Kemi sent a gentle message for her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo are discovering more than work together. Each day brings new understanding, new moments of quiet connection. Stay with them as the story unfolds. Walking through the streets toward her apartment, the snow began to fall again, soft and light, blanketing the city in white. Kemi felt anticipation, excitement, and a subtle awareness of the pull she could not name. She wasn't supposed to fall for him, she knew that, but the moments, the shared understanding, and the trust were making it increasingly difficult to deny. That night, as she drifted to sleep, Kemi imagined tomorrow. The bustling market, the vibrant colors, the music, and the conversations that would once again draw them closer, not just in work, but in understanding, respect, and the beginnings of something tender. She realized quietly that the story was unfolding slowly, delicately, and beautifully, like the snow falling over two worlds beginning to intersect, two hearts quietly finding resonance in each other. The morning was crisp when Kemi stepped out into the streets, the sun low but gleaming off the snow-covered rooftops. Today was the day she had been anticipating, the visit to the traditional market. The scent of freshly baked bread, roasted chestnuts, and spices drifted through the air as she navigated the familiar alleyways, her breath forming small clouds with every step. Hyunwoo met her outside the building, wearing a thick coat and scarf, his hands tucked into his pockets. "Good morning," he said, voice calm yet carrying a note of warmth. "Good morning, sir," Kemi replied, feeling the subtle flutter in her chest at his greeting. The market was alive with vibrant colors, bustling vendors, and the rhythm of everyday life. Kemi guided Hyunwoo through the narrow lanes, pointing out cultural practices, local delicacies, and small stories behind each stall. She explained the significance of the spices, the traditional fabrics, the music echoing from a nearby musician's stringed instrument. Hyunwoo observed quietly, occasionally asking questions not to interrogate but to understand. "Why is this fabric important?" he asked, holding a brightly patterned cloth. "It tells a story," Kemi explained. The patterns represent family, ancestry, and celebration. Every piece carries meaning. He nodded, absorbing her words, his eyes occasionally meeting hers with a fleeting curiosity. She felt the subtle connection growing, the bond of understanding stretching gently between them, unspoken, yet undeniable. A young boy offered a small drum for demonstration. Kemi handed it to Hyunwoo, encouraging him to try. He hesitated, then tapped lightly, producing a rhythm that was awkward but sincere. "You see?" Kemi smiled. "Music doesn't have to be perfect to tell a story. Feeling matters more than skill." Hyunwoo smiled faintly, and for a moment the formal distance that had defined their relationship seemed to melt away. After the market, they visited a small cafe tucked in a quiet street, where the walls were decorated with African and Korean art, blending the two cultures in subtle harmony. Kemi explained the artist's intentions while Hyunwoo listened, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his appreciation for nuance and emotion. "Culture is not just what we see," he said quietly, "but what we feel, what resonates within us." "Yes," Kemi replied, her voice soft. "It's the same in stories. You need to feel the heartbeat of the people to truly understand them." They spent hours reviewing their findings, preparing for the next day's live session with international participants. Hyunwoo's trust in Kemi grew with each passing moment, and she noticed how he increasingly relied on her judgment, seeking her insight not just for translations but for cultural context, for understanding the emotions behind the words. As the sun dipped lower, the streets glowed in golden light. They walked back to the EIA office together, the soft crunch of snow under their boots filling the quiet spaces between them. Kemi noticed the subtle shifts in him, the relaxed posture, the rare warmth in his expression, and the way his eyes lingered on her just a fraction longer than necessary. Before leaving for the day, Hyunwoo turned to her. "Tomorrow I want you to help me prepare questions for the artist's webinar. I need your perspective on what matters most. What should be highlighted?" Kemi nodded, feeling a gentle thrill at the acknowledgement of her expertise. "I'll prepare everything, sir." He paused, meeting her gaze for a brief moment, a small softness in his eyes. "Good. I trust your judgment." It was the kind of trust that felt rare, precious, and quietly intimate. Kemi felt a warmth spreading in her chest, one that went beyond professional satisfaction. She wasn't supposed to feel this, she knew that, but the bond was forming regardless, slowly, delicately, and with purpose. That evening, as she walked home through the softly falling snow, Kemi reflected on the day. She had guided him through her world, shared the colors, the music, the smells, and now he was seeing her perspective, appreciating it, valuing it. She realized that this story, their story, was growing, not through grand gestures or declarations, but through shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. Before closing her door, she sent a gentle note for her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo are exploring more than work together. Their journey is unfolding slowly, filled with moments of understanding, curiosity, and connection. Don't miss what happens next. Inside, Kemi prepared for bed, thinking of tomorrow. She imagined the artists, the stories, and the conversations that awaited them, and she felt a mix of nervousness, excitement, and a subtle awareness of something tender blossoming between them. As she drifted to sleep, she pictured the city blanketed in snow, the vibrant market, the music, and the quiet moments she shared with him, moments that carried more than work, moments that whispered of understanding, trust, and perhaps the gentle beginnings of love. The next morning, Kemi woke to the faint sunlight reflecting off the snow outside her window. Today's task was simple in description but significant in impact. She and Hyunwoo would lead a live webinar featuring African artists, bridging their cultures with the wider world. At the office, Hyunwoo was already reviewing his notes. His posture was the usual precise, disciplined one, but there was a subtle softness in his movements as he looked up when Kemi arrived. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," she replied, feeling the familiar flutter in her chest at his greeting. They spent the first part of the morning preparing for the webinar, reviewing questions, clarifying cultural context, and rehearsing translations. Kemi noticed how Hyunwoo relied on her guidance not only for accuracy, but for the emotional resonance of the stories. She found herself enjoying the responsibility, the trust, and the quiet connection growing between them. By mid-morning, participants from across Africa and Korea joined the virtual session. Kemi translated each speaker's introduction and ensured the meaning behind every word was clear. Hyunwoo listened intently, occasionally nodding at her interpretations, asking questions to deepen understanding. His trust in her had grown enough that he sometimes waited silently for her translations, valuing her judgment over his assumptions. One young storyteller shared memories of her childhood in Lagos. the music of drums echoing through her neighborhood, the aroma of home-cooked meals, the laughter of children playing in the streets. Kemi translated every detail, capturing not just the words but the feelings behind them. Hyunwoo's expression softened as he listened, and he turned to Kemi for clarification on a cultural nuance. "You're helping me see the world through their eyes," he said quietly during a brief pause. Kemi's chest warmed at the acknowledgement. "I want you to understand it fully. That's the only way the story matters." He nodded, his gaze lingering just slightly longer than before, and she felt the subtle pull of connection strengthening between them. After the session, they reviewed recordings and notes, making adjustments for future presentations. Hyunwoo's questions were thoughtful, not critical, showing a desire to understand, to learn, and to honor the voices they represented. Kemi realized that in this structured, precise man, there was a heart willing to embrace differences, to notice what others might overlook, and to value authenticity. During a short break, Kemi stepped out onto the terrace. The snow had fallen overnight, covering the city in a sparkling blanket of white. Hyunwoo joined her silently, and for a few moments they simply stood together watching the city. "You notice more than most people do," he said softly. Kemi glanced at him. "I've always had to. It helps me understand people, places, life." He studied her for a moment, the usual intensity in his gaze tempered by something gentle. "I can see why you're invaluable. You don't just see things, you feel them." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to look away, to focus on the city, the snow, anything but the way he saw her. Yet she held his gaze, feeling a strange warmth, a connection growing quietly but insistently. By late afternoon, they returned inside to continue work. Kemi translated discussions, prepared cultural notes, and briefed Hyunwoo on subtle details from the webinar. The professional partnership was evolving into something deeper, marked by trust, attention, and unspoken understanding. As they packed up for the day, Hyunwoo spoke. "Tomorrow I want us to prepare for a collaborative storytelling session. You'll guide me through the cultural elements, highlight the nuances, and help me ask questions that matter." Kemi smiled, the small thrill of acknowledgement lighting her chest. "I'll prepare everything." He nodded, his eyes lingering on her for a brief second longer than usual. "Good, I trust you completely." It was a simple statement, but it carried weight, a recognition that went beyond skill or competence. It was acknowledgement of her insight, her perspective, and her value as more than just an assistant. Walking home through the quiet, snow-dusted streets, Kemi reflected on the day. Each interaction with him, each shared glance, each moment of trust, was quietly weaving a bond between them. She wasn't supposed to fall for him, yet she couldn't ignore the pull. Before closing her apartment door, she sent a subtle note to her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo's story is unfolding through trust, understanding, and small moments of connection. Stay with them. They're discovering more than just work together. Inside, she prepared for bed, thinking about tomorrow. She imagined the collaborative storytelling session, the conversations, the laughter, and the quiet moments that would continue to build a delicate bridge between their worlds. As she drifted to sleep, she pictured the snow-covered city, the vibrant markets, and the small, tender exchanges that marked the beginning of something quietly beautiful. The following morning, Kemi awoke with a quiet anticipation. Today, they would lead a collaborative storytelling session, bringing together African artists and Korean audiences in a shared, creative space. She had prepared notes, translations, and cultural insights, but what truly excited her was guiding Hyunwoo through this experience. At Hanyul Tech, the office buzzed softly with activity. Hyunwoo was already at his desk reviewing final details for the session. When he looked up and noticed her, he gave a brief nod, a small acknowledgement, yet for Kemi it felt like a personal greeting. "Good morning," she said, smiling faintly. "Good morning," he replied, his tone calm but carrying warmth, a subtle shift from the formal distance of their first days. They began by reviewing the artist's submissions, translating stories, and preparing discussion points. Hyunwoo observed closely, occasionally pausing to ask questions that demonstrated curiosity, patience, and trust. Kemi realized he was no longer just relying on her for accuracy. He valued her judgment, her insight, and her understanding of culture and emotion. By mid-morning, the session began. African artists shared music, poetry, and visual art. Kemi translated with care, ensuring that every nuance was preserved. Hyunwoo listened intently, absorbing the words, the emotions, and the cultural significance behind them. When he asked clarifying questions, it was clear he genuinely wanted to understand, not to test or impress. One artist described a childhood memory of Lagos streets filled with music, laughter, and community gatherings. Kemi translated every detail, capturing the rhythm, emotion, and essence of the moment. Hyunwoo leaned back slightly, eyes softening as he listened. "You're helping me feel it," he said quietly during a short break, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Kemi's chest warmed at the acknowledgement. "That's my goal. So people understand, not just hear." He nodded, meeting her gaze for a brief, lingering moment. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet the connection between them felt stronger. After the session, they reviewed recordings, discussed feedback, and prepared for follow-up interactions. Hyunwoo's questions were increasingly thoughtful, focusing on meaning and context rather than mere technicalities. Kemi noticed the shift. He was learning from her, appreciating her perspective, and slowly letting his guard down. During a short break, Kemi stepped onto the terrace. The city was quiet, the late afternoon sun casting golden light across the rooftops. Hyunwoo joined her, standing a few steps away. "You notice things that matter," he said softly. Kemi glanced at him. "I've always had to. It helps me understand the world, people, life." He studied her briefly, the usual intensity in his gaze softened by something tender. "I can see why your insight is invaluable. You see more than words." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to look away, to focus on the city, the sky, anything but the way he saw her. Yet she met his gaze, feeling a subtle warmth, a quiet pull she could no longer ignore. Back inside, they finalized the session notes, discussed potential improvements, and planned the next steps. Their professional collaboration had evolved into something deeper, marked by trust, shared understanding, and a growing awareness of one another. As the office emptied, Hyunwoo spoke. "Tomorrow we'll meet with more artists from both cultures. I'd like you to guide me through the nuances, the subtleties, what I should pay attention to." Kemi nodded, feeling a gentle thrill. "I'll prepare everything." He paused, meeting her eyes, a small softness lingering. "Good, I trust you completely." It was a simple statement, yet it carried weight. Recognition of her insight, respect for her judgment, and a subtle acknowledgement of her presence in his life. Walking home through the softly falling snow, Kemi reflected on the day. Every shared glance, every question, every moment of trust was quietly building a bond between them. She wasn't supposed to fall for him, but the connection was undeniable, delicate, and growing with each interaction. Before closing her apartment door, she sent a gentle note for her viewers. "Kemi and Hyunwoo are discovering more than just work together. Each day brings moments of trust, understanding, and quiet connection. Stay with them as their story unfolds." That night she prepared for bed, thinking of tomorrow, the new artists, the shared stories, the quiet moments that continue to build a subtle bridge between their worlds. She imagined conversations, laughter, and understanding growing into something tender. As she drifted to sleep, the city lay blanketed in snow, quiet yet alive with possibility. Kemi thought of Hyunwoo, of the subtle warmth in his attention, and of the growing awareness that this story, slow, deliberate, and delicate, was far more than just work. The next morning, Kemi arrived at the office feeling a quiet excitement. Today they would meet a new group of artists, each bringing unique stories and perspectives from both African and Korean cultures. The thought of guiding Hyunwoo through these experiences made her heart lift with anticipation, even as she reminded herself to remain professional. Hyunwoo was already at his desk, reviewing notes. When he noticed her, he gave a brief nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that had become familiar and comforting over the past days. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, sir," Kemi replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. They began by reviewing the submissions from the new artists, translating and discussing each story's nuances. Kemi noticed how Hyunwoo's attention to detail had deepened. He wasn't just listening, he was absorbing, processing, and appreciating the layers behind each narrative. During a short break, Kemi and Hyunwoo walked through the office courtyard, snow lightly dusting the pathways. The quiet beauty of the morning reflected the calm focus they had developed together. "You've grown so accustomed to noticing subtleties," Hyunwoo said quietly, almost as if thinking aloud. "It's impressive and rare." Kemi glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. "I've always had to. It helps me understand people, places, life." He nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a brief moment. "I see why your perspective matters. It's not just skill, it's insight, empathy." Her chest warmed at the acknowledgement. She wanted to look away, yet she held his gaze, feeling the connection deepen. The morning progressed with translations, interviews, and detailed notes. Kemi guided Hyunwoo through the cultural significance of each story, explaining traditions, symbols, and the emotions embedded within the narratives. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that showed a growing respect, not just for the work, but for her understanding and guidance. One artist shared a story about a community gathering in Lagos, describing music, dance, and the laughter of children weaving through the streets. Kemi translated, capturing every nuance while Hyunwoo observed, occasionally jotting down notes and asking questions to grasp the deeper cultural meaning. "You help me see the soul behind their words," he said softly during a brief pause. Kemi felt a quiet thrill at the recognition. "I want people to feel it, not just hear it." He turned to her fully, eyes meeting hers with a subtle intensity. The moment was fleeting, yet it carried weight, a silent acknowledgement of trust, understanding, and connection. After lunch, they continued working, preparing for the next webinar session and reviewing recordings. Hyunwoo increasingly relied on Kemi's judgment, not only for accuracy but for cultural insight, emotional resonance, and understanding the storyteller's intentions. By late afternoon, the office was quiet. Most of the staff had left, leaving only the soft hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. Kemi packed her things slowly, savoring the quiet moments and the shared experiences of the day. Hyunwoo approached her desk. "Tomorrow, I want us to prepare discussion points for the artists' collaborative session. I'd like your perspective on what's meaningful, what should be highlighted." Kemi nodded, feeling a gentle thrill of acknowledgement. "I'll prepare everything." He paused, meeting her eyes, and for a brief moment his usual composure softened. "Good, I trust you completely." It was a simple statement, yet it carried depth, a recognition of her insight, her judgment, and her value not just as an assistant, but as a collaborator, a guide, and increasingly a companion in this shared journey. Walking home through the softly falling snow, Kemi reflected on the day. Every glance, every question, every small moment of trust and understanding was quietly building a bond between them. She wasn't supposed to feel drawn to him, yet the connection was undeniable, subtle, and growing stronger with each interaction. Before entering her apartment, she sent a gentle note to her viewers. "Kemi and Hyunwoo's journey is unfolding through trust, shared understanding, and moments of quiet connection. Don't miss what happens next as their story continues to grow." Inside, she prepared for bed, thinking about tomorrow, the collaborative session, the stories, the conversations that would continue to weave their lives closer together. She felt anticipation, excitement, and a growing awareness that something tender was blossoming between them. As she drifted to sleep, Kemi pictured the snow-covered city, the vibrant stories, and the subtle, intimate moments she shared with Hyunwoo. Moments that carried more than work, moments that whispered of understanding, respect, and the gentle beginnings of love. The next morning, Kemi awoke to the soft light filtering through her curtains, casting a gentle glow across her room. She felt anticipation and a quiet excitement for the day ahead. The collaborative session with artists from both Africa and Korea was scheduled, and she would guide Hyunwoo through the nuances, helping him understand the cultural depth behind each story. Arriving at the office, she found Hyunwoo already reviewing notes. When he looked up and saw her, he gave a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a small gesture, yet for Kemi it carried warmth and reassurance. "Good morning," she said softly. "Good morning," he replied, his tone calm, yet somehow warmer than usual. They began the morning reviewing submissions, discussing each story's context, and translating subtle cultural cues. Kemi noticed how Hyunwoo's curiosity had deepened. He wasn't merely attentive, he was genuinely invested in understanding, asking questions that reflected thoughtfulness and respect. During a short break, Kemi suggested they step out to the terrace. The winter city stretched before them, streets blanketed in soft snow, rooftops sparkling in the morning light. The quiet beauty of the scene mirrored the calm focus they had developed together over the past days. "You notice things others often miss," Hyunwoo said softly. Kemi glanced at him, a faint blush rising. "I've always had to. It helps me understand people, culture, life." He studied her briefly, the usual precision in his gaze softened by an unusual tenderness. "I can see why your perspective matters so much. It's more than skill, it's empathy." Her chest warmed at his words. She wanted to look away, but she held his gaze, feeling the subtle connection between them deepen. The collaborative session began shortly after, bringing together artists sharing music, poetry, and visual storytelling. Kemi translated with care, ensuring that the full depth of meaning and emotion reached Hyunwoo and the audience. He listened intently, occasionally turning to her for clarification, demonstrating trust and reliance beyond the professional realm. One young artist described a childhood memory of her neighborhood in Lagos, the rhythmic drum beats echoing through the streets, children laughing and playing, and the warmth of family gatherings. Kemi translated each word, conveying emotion as well as meaning. Hyunwoo leaned back slightly, absorbing the story, occasionally asking questions to fully grasp the cultural significance. "You make me feel it," he said quietly during a brief pause, almost as if speaking to himself. Kemi felt a quiet thrill. "That's my goal, so people experience it, not just hear it." He turned to her, eyes meeting hers with a subtle intensity that lingered for a moment before he looked away. It was brief, but it left a lasting warmth, a quiet acknowledgement of trust, understanding, and connection. After the session, they reviewed recordings and notes, planning follow-up interactions. Hyunwoo increasingly relied on Kemi's judgment, not only for translations, but for understanding the emotional layers and subtleties of each story. She realized that the professional collaboration had quietly evolved into something deeper, marked by mutual respect and subtle emotional intimacy. As the office emptied late in the afternoon, Hyunwoo spoke. "Tomorrow we'll meet with another set of artists. I'd like you to guide me through their stories, highlight what's important, what deserves attention." Kemi nodded, feeling a gentle thrill. "I'll prepare everything." He paused, meeting her eyes with a fleeting softness. "Good. I trust you completely." It was a simple statement, yet it carried weight, acknowledgement of her insight, respect for her perspective, and the growing recognition of her significance in his life. Walking home through the softly falling snow, Kemi reflected on the day. Each glance, each question, each shared moment of trust was quietly weaving a bond between them. She knew she wasn't supposed to feel drawn to him, yet the connection was undeniable, tender, and growing stronger with every shared experience. Before entering her apartment, she sent a gentle note to her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo's journey is unfolding through trust, shared understanding, and quiet connections. Stay with them as their story continues to grow. Inside, Kemi prepared for bed, thinking of tomorrow, the stories, the laughter, and the quiet moments that would continue to bridge their worlds. Anticipation, excitement, and the growing awareness of something tender blossoming between them filled her thoughts. As she drifted into sleep, Kemi pictured the snow-covered city, the stories they had shared, and the subtle moments of intimacy with Hyunwoo, moments that spoke of understanding, respect, and the delicate beginnings of love. The next morning, Kemi felt a quiet anticipation as she stepped outside, the winter sun casting a soft glow over the city. Today, they would meet a new set of artists, each bringing their own stories, rhythms, and colors. She had spent the night reviewing notes and preparing translations, eager to guide Hyunwoo through the nuances that would bring the stories to life. Arriving at the office, she found Hyunwoo already at his desk, meticulously reviewing the latest submissions. When he looked up and noticed her, he offered a faint nod and a small smile, the kind that carried warmth and recognition without words. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm but carrying a subtle excitement. "Good morning," he replied, his tone soft yet steady, a balance of professionalism and something more gentle. They began by reviewing each artist's submission, translating, discussing nuances, and highlighting cultural context. Hyunwoo's focus was intense, but Kemi noticed a subtle shift. His attention was now more than professional. It carried a curiosity and respect for her insight. During a short break, Kemi suggested they step outside. The streets were quiet, covered in snow that glistened like scattered diamonds. The crisp air carried a faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor. Hyunwoo followed silently, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You notice details that others overlook," he said softly, almost as if he were thinking aloud. Kemi looked at him, feeling a small blush rise. "I've always had to. It helps me understand people, culture, life." He studied her briefly, eyes softened with something tender. "I see why your perspective matters. It's more than skill, it's insight and empathy." Her chest warmed at his words. She wanted to look away, but she held his gaze, feeling the subtle connection between them deepen. The collaborative session began shortly after. Artists shared stories of childhood memories, music, dance, and the simple joys of everyday life. Kemi translated with care, ensuring that every nuance, emotion, and cultural significance reached Hyunwoo and the audience. One young storyteller described a festival in Lagos, with drums echoing through streets, children laughing, and families dancing. Kemi captured every detail, conveying the rhythm, joy, and heart of the experience. Hyunwoo listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions to fully grasp the deeper meaning. "You help me feel it," he said quietly during a pause, his voice barely audible. Kemi's chest fluttered. "That's my goal. I want people to experience it, not just hear it." He turned to her, eyes meeting hers with a lingering intensity. The moment was brief but powerful, leaving warmth and a sense of connection that neither could ignore. After the session, they reviewed recordings, notes, and planned follow-ups. Hyunwoo increasingly relied on Kemi's judgment, not only for accuracy but for understanding emotion, context, and meaning. The professional partnership had evolved into a delicate, deep connection built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. By late afternoon, the office emptied, leaving only the soft hum of computers and faint rustle of papers. Kemi packed her belongings slowly, savoring the quiet moments and the sense of accomplishment from the day. Hyunwoo approached her desk. "Tomorrow we'll meet with another group of artists. I want you to guide me through their stories. Help me see what matters most, what should be highlighted." Kemi nodded, feeling a quiet thrill. "I'll prepare everything." He paused, meeting her eyes with a softness that had become familiar. "Good. I trust you completely." It was a simple statement, yet it carried depth. A recognition of her insight, her judgment, and her growing importance in his life. Walking home through the snow-covered streets, Kemi reflected on the day. Every glance, question, and shared moment of trust had been quietly building a bond between them. She knew she wasn't supposed to fall for him, but the connection was undeniable, tender, and growing stronger with each passing day. Before entering her apartment, she sent a subtle note to her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo are discovering more than work together. Each day brings moments of trust, understanding, and quiet connection. Don't miss what happens next as their story unfolds. Inside, she prepared for bed, thinking of tomorrow, the stories, laughter, and small moments that would continue to weave their worlds together. Anticipation, excitement, and a growing awareness of something tender blossoming between them filled her thoughts. As she drifted to sleep, Kemi pictured the snow-blanketed city, the vibrant stories, and the delicate, intimate moments with Hyunwoo, moments that carried more than work, moments that whispered of understanding, respect, and the beginnings of love. The following morning, Kemi woke with a quiet tension she couldn't quite name. Today's session with the artist promised to be different. There was a feeling in the air, a subtle anticipation, as if the city itself sensed change. At the office, Hyunwoo was already seated, reviewing notes with meticulous care. When he saw her enter, he offered a small nod, but something in his expression was softer, more contemplative. "Good morning," Kemi said, her voice calm but betraying a flicker of nervousness. "Good morning," he replied, his eyes lingering just a fraction longer than usual. The day began with translations, introductions, and discussions. Kemi noticed that Hyunwoo's questions were now deeper, more personal in a subtle way. He asked not only about cultural significance, but also about emotions behind each story, probing for the human heartbeat rather than just the words. During a brief break, Kemi stepped onto the terrace. Snow had given way to sunlight, and the city shimmered like a mosaic of silver and gold. Hyunwoo joined her silently, hands tucked into his coat pockets. "You've changed the way I see their stories," he said quietly. "And you've changed the way I see this work." Kemi's chest tightened. "That's what I hope to do. Not just translate words, but meaning, connection." He turned to her fully, a vulnerability in his gaze that made her catch her breath. "I didn't realize how much I needed that perspective. I trust you, Kemi, more than I've trusted anyone in a long time." Her heart fluttered. She wanted to look away, but she held his gaze. "I trust you too, Hyunwoo," she said softly. For the first time, there was a pause. No work, no professional barriers, just a shared, unspoken understanding between them. The collaborative session resumed, but both of them were subtly different. Kemi noticed how Hyunwoo laughed more freely, asked questions with genuine curiosity, and occasionally glanced at her as if seeking a connection beyond words. She too felt a shift, an awareness of something tender and quietly powerful growing between them. Mid-afternoon, a young artist shared a story about her grandmother teaching her to play a traditional drum, explaining how rhythm connected generations. Kemi translated carefully, capturing the emotion, while Hyunwoo listened intently, nodding with understanding. "You're teaching me more than the stories," he said quietly when she handed him a translation sheet. "You're teaching me how to feel them." Her fingers tingled as she handed the paper to him. The acknowledgement was simple, yet it carried weight, a recognition of her presence, her heart, and the bond forming between them. After the session, they sat together reviewing notes, a quiet intimacy settling over the room. Hyunwoo turned toward her, expression thoughtful. Kemi, I didn't expect this, he admitted. I didn't expect that I'd care so much, or that I'd notice you in this way. Her breath caught. Neither did I, she whispered. He smiled faintly, a mix of relief and quiet affection. I've spent so long focused only on work, on precision, on results. But now, I realize that connection, understanding, that matters just as much. Maybe even more. Kemi felt warmth spread through her chest. I felt the same, she admitted softly. I wasn't supposed to, but it's happened anyway. For a long moment, they simply sat together, words unnecessary, each aware of the subtle bond that had grown through shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. Later, as the city was bathed in the golden light of sunset, Kemi and Hyunwoo walked together to the office exit. The snow reflected the fading sun, sparkling like a promise in the crisp evening air. Tomorrow we'll continue our work, Kemi said gently, but I think we've already discovered something important today. Hyunwoo nodded, his hand brushing against hers ever so slightly. Yes, something important. As they parted for the evening, both carried a quiet certainty that their journey had shifted, not just professionally but personally. The stories they translated, the cultures they connected, and the trust they had built had created something delicate, profound, and undeniably theirs. Kemi walked home, her heart lighter, her mind replaying the small, meaningful moments of the day, the way he had listened, the trust he had shown, and the subtle acknowledgement of something deeper growing between them. She knew the story was no longer just about translation, collaboration, or culture. It was about hearts finding resonance, two lives slowly weaving together, and the quiet awakening of love built on understanding, respect, and shared experience. The next morning, Kemi arrived at the office with a sense of quiet anticipation. Today would be their final collaborative session before the project concluded. There was an unspoken energy in the air, a feeling that something significant was about to crystallize, not in the work itself, but in the connection between her and Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo was already seated reviewing notes. When he looked up and saw her, his eyes held the softness and warmth that had been slowly growing over the past weeks. "Good morning, Kemi," he said, his tone carrying more ease than it had in the first days. "Good morning," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. They began the day reviewing the final submissions, translating stories, and preparing their notes for the concluding session. Kemi noticed how Hyunwoo's questions now reflected not just curiosity, but care, an appreciation for nuance, emotion, and the human stories behind the words. During a short break, they stepped onto the terrace together. The city below sparkled with sunlight reflecting off the winter snow, and the air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of roasting chestnuts. "Today feels different," Kemi said softly, sensing the unspoken tension and anticipation. Hyunwoo turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. "It does," he admitted, "and I think it's because I've realized something important over these past weeks." Kemi's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I care," he said, the words deliberate, honest. "I care about the work, yes, but more than that, I care about you. Your insight, your heart, your perspective. You've shown me a way to see the world differently, and I can't ignore that." Kemi felt warmth flood through her chest, a gentle, exhilarating recognition of feelings she had been quietly nurturing herself. "I care too," she admitted softly. "I wasn't supposed to, but it happened anyway." For a moment, the world seemed to pause around them. The snow, the city, the soft rustle of wind, everything fading into the background as they simply acknowledged the bond that had grown, quietly and patiently, between them. The final session began with a sense of unity and celebration. Artists from both cultures shared their work, and Kemi translated with care, ensuring the emotion and meaning resonated fully. Hyunwoo asked thoughtful questions, showing a depth of understanding that reflected not just the stories, but the lessons he had learned from Kemi. After the session, the office emptied, leaving them in a quiet space filled with sunlight streaming through the windows. Hyunwoo turned to her, a small smile playing at his lips. "Kemi, I wanted to say thank you," he said, his voice soft, "for your guidance, your patience, and for letting me see not just the stories, but you. You've changed the way I work and the way I feel." Kemi, smiled, feeling a mix of relief, joy, and anticipation. And you've shown me that trust and understanding can create something meaningful, even beyond words. There was a long pause, then Hyunwoo stepped closer, extending his hand gently. Would you walk with me? She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch and the unspoken promise in the gesture. They walked through the office corridors, the sunlight catching the subtle sparkle of snow outside the windows. As they reached the terrace, Kemi felt the gentle pull of emotion, the culmination of weeks spent together, learning, laughing, translating not just words but hearts. Hyunwoo turned to her, eyes soft but steady. Kemi, he began, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this. I want to continue this journey with you, not just as colleagues, but as more. Her heart swelled. She had felt it too, this undeniable connection, this slow, steady bond that had grown through trust, understanding, and shared experiences. I want that too, she said softly. For the first time, their closeness was unguarded, sincere, and full of warmth. They stood together, the city below them bathed in golden sunlight, snow sparkling around, a quiet testament to the moments they had shared. Hyunwoo reached out gently, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. I promise to honor you, respect you, and cherish this connection, he said quietly. Kemi smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had never anticipated. And I promise the same. They walked back inside hand in hand, not needing words because every glance, every subtle gesture, every shared silence had already said more than words ever could. That evening, as Kemi returned home, she reflected on the journey they had shared, how their professional collaboration had blossomed into mutual respect, understanding, and love. She sent a gentle note to her viewers. Kemi and Hyunwoo's story reminds us that connection, trust, and shared understanding can grow slowly, quietly, and beautifully. Stay tuned as their journey continues, filled with culture, love, and discovery. She prepared for bed, feeling anticipation for tomorrow and gratitude for today. The city lay quiet outside her window, streets blanketed in snow and lights shimmering in the distance. For the first time, Kemi felt a sense of completion, not of an ending but of a chapter that had grown into something meaningful, tender, and lasting. She closed her eyes, imagining the adventures, the stories, and the life she and Hyunwoo would continue to share. Weeks had passed since the final collaborative session. The project was officially complete, yet Kemi and Hyunwoo's connection had only deepened. Their days were no longer defined solely by work. They found themselves sharing quiet breakfasts, exchanging thoughts about art, culture, and life, and laughing over small, unexpected moments. One afternoon, they walked through the streets of the city together, snow melting into the soft warmth of early spring. The markets buzzed with life, children played near the fountains, and the air carried the mingling scents of roasted peanuts and fresh pastries. Kemi glanced at Hyunwoo, who paused to admire a street mural. The painting depicted two hands reaching across oceans, connected by threads of music and color. She felt a gentle warmth in her chest. The mural seemed to mirror their journey. You see it too? She asked softly. Hyunwoo nodded, eyes on the mural. I do. It's like us, isn't it? Two worlds connecting, learning, understanding. Kemi smiled. Exactly like us. For a long moment they walked in companionable silence, each reflecting on how far they had come. What had begun as professional collaboration had blossomed into mutual respect, deep friendship, and the quiet, steady unfolding of love. Later that evening they returned to Kemi's apartment. She prepared tea while Hyunwoo unpacked a small bag of gifts he had brought back from his travels, artisanal crafts, delicately painted notebooks, and a few small items that reflected the shared experiences they had treasured. He handed her a notebook, its cover decorated with patterns blending African and Korean motifs. For your stories, he said softly, for the translations, the dreams, and everything you helped bring to life. Kemi's eyes glistened. It's beautiful. Thank you. They sat together, sipping tea, the warmth of the moment wrapping around them like a gentle embrace. Words were not necessary. Every glance, every subtle touch, every shared smile spoke volumes. As night fell, Kemi stepped to her window, looking out at the city lights. She thought of the beginning, the uncertainty, the nerves, the anticipation, and now of the present, trust, understanding, and a love that had grown naturally, delicately, without rush or force. Hyunwoo joined her silently. His hand brushed hers lightly, and she turned to meet his gaze. No matter where our stories take us next, he said softly, I want us to continue writing them together. Kemi nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. Together, she echoed, In that quiet moment, the city below seemed to hum in harmony with their hearts. Two lives, once strangers from different worlds, had found connection, understanding, and love. They had translated more than words. They had translated hearts, bridging cultures, dreams, and destinies. And as they stood there side by side, Kemi whispered a small, heartfelt prayer, not for fame, success, or recognition, but for courage, gratitude, and the gentle unfolding of a story that would continue softly, beautifully, and endlessly.